everyone. My name is Andy Escalante, and I am one of the co-founders of BehaviorMe. I'm also a behavior analyst, and at BehaviorMe, we create virtual reality hiring and training simulations for the caring field, starting with applied behavior analysis, which is the science of human behavior and learning. And with me today, we have some incredible panelists, including Nilda Paquin and Clarama Dorvilas. And I would love for both Nilda and Clarama to introduce themselves and give us a short little spiel about what they do and who they are. Nilda, please take it away.
I'm very excited to be here. Hi, everybody. My name is Nilda Paquin, and I am the founder and CEO of MindGlow. And at MindGlow, we use the immersive experience of VR to maximize workplace safety and prepare employees for emergencies, starting with active shooter training. So our mission is to save lives through empowerment and engagement. And I'm also the course creator for VR Training 101, a 6-week program that offers a cross-disciplinary approach to designing VR trainings for businesses.
Wonderful. And Chloe, can you please introduce yourself to the panel?
Yeah, hi, my name is Clarama Dorvilas. I'm the founder and CEO of Debias VR. What we do is we create simulations, games, tests, leveraging VR spatial advantage for being able to provide behavioral training in a very accountable way. So what we do is we look at the ways that research currently shows for case studies that have shown how we can reduce bias in real world examples and scenarios, and we kind of replicate that in VR or in gaming. And then what we do is we create tests, but right now we have like a translated implicit association test. Being able to kind of close the gaps between finding ways where we can reveal or uncover unconscious bias discrepancies in a way, or the way that we're thinking and how we imply in the way that we interact with different people and what triggers that, and kind of reveal that using a behavioral environment that could enable us to collect data in new ways that we couldn't collect data before. So what we are, the outcomes of what we're doing is actually really looking at how our behavior in the VR world actually translates into the real world by replicating that in VR, and then using data and different ways of metrics to collect that to ascertain what that looks like. I don't think that was, yeah, that's it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for introducing yourselves. And now that we're all better acquainted with one another, I kind of wanted to give everyone who's viewing this stream a quick rundown as to why we decided to talk about this topic of dissemination in XR. So my background, I'm a behavior analyst by training. I practiced in the field for about 10 years, working with kids and adults with autism and developmental disabilities. And in my field, boy, we have done a pretty poor job disseminating who we are and what we do. We are a branch of psychology, and we aren't very well known, to be quite honest. And it's such a bummer, because the power of the technology that we have within my field of behavior analysis is so powerful, and yet not too many people know who we are. And it seems as if we are stuck in this interesting echo chamber of sorts. And I've seen, I want to say, similar veins within XR as well. We talk about the incredible technology and power that one can have using XR to teach a multitude of different skill sets and a multitude of different behaviors. And it's a shame that we haven't really permeated into the world as much as we could. And I wanted to bring in both Chloe and Nilda to kind of talk about these sort of topics as well within their own respective contexts and personal histories within XR and their professional backgrounds. So I guess before we even tackle dissemination and potential issues and also potential solutions within this field, I would love to talk about how you got into this field. It's always really interesting to hear that initial origin story of, well, this is what interested me, and this is why I saw the potential of using XR in X manner. And so I would love to learn a little bit more about that. So Nilda, why did you enter this field, and what really grasped your attention?
Yeah, so I tried on my very first VR headset in 2014, and at that moment, I knew I wanted to be part of it. I remember standing in line at GDC in 2014, wondering, like, what is it that that's actually people are putting on top of their heads, and all of a sudden they take it off and they have this mind-blowing expression of, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just experienced that. So I went in and tried it, and I just knew that I wanted to be part of it and part of creating things with this device. So I saw its potential, especially for training. So since then, I was spending years learning about the technology, attending a lot of events, taking classes to see what it was capable of and how I could create things with it. So one day I had a conversation with a large company exec about how they prepare employees for active threats, considering that in the United States, we unfortunately have this epidemic of active shootings. And the way that people are preparing for it, it's traumatizing or unengaging. So I realized that this is actually a really great way to use virtual reality to provide a very safe and a safe way to train for a dangerous situation. And since then, I've been working on this product and got funded by a startup accelerator in Silicon Valley, Boost VC, and then now we have this product that we're selling to businesses.
Wonderful. And Chloe, what's your background within XR and how you got into this field?
Yeah, so I tried it for the first time a year after Nelda's. Yeah, I was in grad school. I was motivated to look for an immersive solution specifically because I was dealing, like, I was basically the customer for my problem, or the focus, where I knew I was getting really just second class treatment from one of my assistant professors in grad school. And I there was so much explicit evidence that he was treating me differently from my peers and kind of putting me under like a different standards. And so when it came time to look at research thesis, like our program director was like, I want you guys to look at a technological solution that could solve for a social problem. I was like, oh, beautiful. This is going to be, because the option right at that point was to quit grad school. Because I was like, there's no way I can make it with him being the one that's grading all my papers. And then I was like, or I can use this as my revenge. Like, I don't think I would pass this class with him, knowing that he's going to give me like unfair grading or whatever. So I was like, let me just make all my research about bias, or I didn't know what bias was at that time. I just felt like it was stereotyping or that. So and my grad course was interaction design. So it was a very physical computing technical course, subject. So I did that. When I started researching about and then learning about these words called bias and empathy and all these different approaches, I was like, oh shoot, I needed an immersive solution. Like, how do I do a perspective taking? My attempt at that time was to do perspective taking approach for a solution. And then basically after that, I learned for different reasons that might not be the best, that wouldn't have the outcome that I was particularly looking for. But in so doing that process, I actually discovered VR as like a great solution. We had the DK2, so I was like, this is actually going to make my project so much more resourceful. Because what I originally was planning on doing was like getting actors with first-person cameras and GoPros and like filming and trying to do projection mapping on 4 walls, so that way when you walk into a room and you like, I know it was just gonna be like really extreme. And then when I saw that the DK, like, I think there's an article Facebook bought Oculus, and we had a DK2, and so I was like, oh, I can just make that environment in here. Like, I don't have to like go and hire actors and do all this stuff. I can just create like it was just C# at that time, and we had been learning that in the course anyway. So I was like, I can create the environment and just one by one have people have a personal experience with what I'm trying to show them. So that's how I came into VR. And since then, for the last few years, I've been working with different industries, working with healthcare, policing, with neuropsychology, then eventually education. I got funding from Oculus to create a bias test, which we shipped for teachers, that we shipped onto the platforms for the Rift. And then from there, we actually pivoted to the workplace. We started getting a lot of enterprise companies calling us, asking for a solution for them. And so started working with a lot of Fortune 500 companies to design solutions for them and implementing it. And came across a lot of interesting struggles doing so.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, because what I'm hearing from both of your stories is how you both experienced or saw that there was a need, a problem, a pain point of some sort BMA in the educational setting, or your interaction with the teacher, or say when you're having a discussion with some sort of executive at a company, and you saw that XR can possibly be a solution that can solve for this sort of issue. That's amazing. I can't help but relate. In my clinical practice, it's quite difficult to teach individuals with developmental disabilities specific skill sets that require for that individual to be in a specified environment. So consider things like teaching someone how to recognize who is a stranger, who is safe to speak to, or say how to exit in a building if there's an emergency of some sort, like a fire. These were the sort of simulations that Behavior Me first created. And even when it comes to the training aspect, because we also have training modules as well within our company, to replicate a scenario when an individual is in crisis and we have to assist them throughout that crisis. It's quite difficult to replicate through a role play. So we saw that as an issue, as a problem, as a pain point in our field, and we created simulations to address that pain point. So I feel as if all three of us are aligned with seeing that there was a problem and that XR could be that potential solution to assist with that issue. Excellent. So I also want to talk about, now that we have a better understanding of why we went down this approach of this specific modality of training and learning, what exactly, can you provide some examples of potential effective ways to disseminate XR? I know it's quite difficult, and I know that BMA through, say, content creation, like it can be so hard to talk about XR to a population of individuals who may not know what that is. So I would love for both Nilda and Claude to discuss what have been some really interesting and effective examples that you've seen of effective ways to disseminate XR.
Yeah, it's a good question. My answer is going to be a little bit more sad, but if you wanted to go ahead and
honesty is the best policy, so
yeah. Do you want to go ahead and Nilda with that, or should I go ahead? Okay.
You could go ahead.
Okay. Well, the examples that I've seen that work well in this current state is basically when a company is bought into this idea. They understand that VR is the way that they want to solve the problem. VR is the machine to do it. And so they got like buy-in from like top-down leadership, giving a good budget to the person who's going to create this program. And that person is technical or has a technical team, like an innovation team, to like explore and figure out, okay, well, what headset we're going to use. Like they might hire a consultant to like give them the information that they need once they've already identified their problem and how they're going to scope out the solution. Then it's like they just talk to consultants to get a sense of hardware, what the requirements are, and then they have this long runway of like 6 months to a year to like really learn how to build simulations themselves. Like they have this like innovation team to do this, and then with this in-house team developing it, they can then implement, like get the right people involved internally to like go ahead and figure out how to distribute it. And like, so I think like in-house solutions with a huge budget, with top-down buy-in, and basically runway is where I see disseminating VR corporately, enterprise, scaling that kind of being the most successful right now. And I don't think that's an ideal state for the market.
Yeah. So from my experience, when it came to building our app, we knew that, like, as creators, we don't have all the knowledge to create an active shooter training. So early on in the project, we brought in subject matter experts early on, and that's a really important thing to take note of. I feel like as creators in the XR space, we're always trying to explore different ways where we could push this technology and find different use cases. But in reality, we need to really fully understand the problem and understand why things are the way they are right now. And by communicating on both sides of communicating with builders and creators and communicating with these subject matter experts, this is where we could have like that sweet Venn diagram overlap. And that sweet spot is where you could find the right application to use this technology to solve a problem.
I absolutely love that statement. I think that kind of goes into, so we've been discussing these topics of dissemination outside of AWE the past few weeks, Chloe, Noda, and I. And one of the things that we kind of focused on was, as a potential solution of sorts, was this idea of bringing in subject matter experts into this sort of discussion of broadening XR to the general masses. So to harken back to my experience as a behavior analyst, whenever we had an interdisciplinary team of individuals to help one client, so when we had psychiatrists and parents and neighbors, and when we had physical therapists and social workers and behavior analysts working together to help this one person, boy, that's when we saw the most effective interventions being used. And I can't help but think that the same sort of techniques and procedures can also be used within XR, in the sense that bringing in an interdisciplinary team of individuals, of subject matter experts, of content creators, of designers, but also of users as well, potential users, bringing all those voices in and having them have a say in what is being created and how it's going to be created, how this sort of product is going to be iterated upon, is key. That's crucial. And so I'm so happy, Noah, that you mentioned subject matter experts. Yes, that is definitely the key here in order to create something meaningful. There was in one of our discussions from, I don't recall if it was this week or last week, Chloe, you had mentioned this really neat example from your experiences at Device VR, where you were able to pull in people into a behavioral scenario, and I believe something along the lines of how teachers, you were using this product to teach teachers certain behaviors and certain skill sets. Would you mind maybe exploring that a little bit with the attendees?
Yeah, so like I said, so my original point of approaching VR as a solution was actually researching it for the workplace, and then got hit up by different institutions to do things for healthcare, to do things for, and I was always working with subject matter experts there, but I was just the builder. I would develop it, they'd give me the research paper, I'd be like, this looks like how you would want to do it, and then kind of ship that to them. When it came to me doing I worked with Jessica Outlaw, who's like a notable UX researcher in the VR field right now. She was interested. It was her idea to want to try to find a solution to bring bias training, leveraging VR to teachers. She has a daughter who's half Black, and it was her personal concern or mission to, like, when she realized that there was a lot of research that demonstrates that teachers' expectations was going to be the key indicator of how well a student performs in school. However, teachers tend to really have lower expectations of underrepresented students, and so her value being education, she wanted her daughter to make sure she gets the best. So it was her interest in having a solution. So I knew nothing about the education field other than as a grad student, I faced it in a little bit more of an explicit way, and so I was like, yeah, I can help you build this. And so she supplied all this research that she has done. Also, literature review. She worked with a psychologist, I think, and a teacher as well. But it was like, I think the teacher that she was working with, or someone who works in education, was also not a direct teacher of the classroom. So we created the solution. At this time, it was 2017. So it was the Rift that was the easiest for me to build for at that point. That could also be high quality, and we knew we needed two-hand immersion for this simulation that we're going to create to really give us the most accurate data to real life interaction. And so we created the solution. It was great. Blah, blah, blah. We shipped it. We got funding. It worked. And then I had two best friends who were high school teachers. So sorry, a lot more in the background. But yeah. So when I was like, okay, great. Like, I want to test this out. I reached out to my friends who are teachers, and I was like, can I come visit you, like, at your site? I want to see, like, how we can actually get this implemented, like how you could start using this regularly. And they're like, yeah, sure. So, like, I went to visit one of my friends who worked for a low-income public school in San Jose. And I went in, and, like, the immediate thing that I noticed that's, like, completely I didn't take into consideration while building this was just how stressful the environment is. Like, the kids are, like, all over the place. These are high school kids. And then like, and she's kind of like managing, and she just had a kid. And so she was just like, papers were like everywhere. Like, and I was like, okay, well, where do I put the writs for her to use? Like, and so like, I tried to find this spot. We had to like take desks, put it together, because it definitely wasn't going to fit on her desk. Like just finding the space for it in her classroom for it to use was like already hard. And then teaching her how to use the hardware. She had never played Xbox before. And at that time, the Rift controllers were, you know, based off Xbox. And so like, so she was just kind of like struggling with it. She loved the solution, loved it. She was like, this is exactly what we need. And I wanted to use it so much. But the hardware, the way it was implemented, like the time, the break that she would need to find this in the day to use this was, I was like, oh, this is not going to work like this. Like it was like an immediate, like, I like, we have a great solution in theory, but in practice, this is not going to be sustainable. And so then it becomes like going back to the drawing board, like how do we create an actual solution? And so I was working with her, and she was like, well, we have this break room. Maybe it's like, we can put something in this break room, and then people can, when teachers go there on their break, we can use this. But then you would need like, you know, a way to be able to create accounts for different people and all that. But then we would also need to train people to like use it. And I don't know. So I just thought like, okay, there's ways that we can do it, but it was just completely different from idea. And then I also just had more empathy with her situation. I was like, wow, like this is really hard. And bias comes out when you're stressed. It comes out when your consciousness is not able to really manage, you know, your unconscious, like, you know, or make the best judgment. And so it was a really interesting culture shock. And I wish we had done that in the beginning. I think we would have came into that solution at the same time a lot faster. But yeah.
Yeah.
No, excellent. I think that's such a great story, and that's why I wanted to bring it up during the talk. It seems like having some sort of environmental intervention being put into place where you're in an environment that is perfect or ideal for this intervention or this training. In this case, it would be the XR solution that you had created. That is so key, that's so essential. And so it does sound as if a potential solution for dissemination can be obtaining that subject matter expert. And in your case, luckily, you had friends and in your own personal background that were perfect ideal candidates for this sort of solution. Nilda, can you chime in and let us know or give us some sort of insight as to how to obtain subject matter experts within just from scratch? Like, how does one obtain the subject matter expert assistance from scratch?
Yeah. So before I got into VR, I was working as a UX designer. So part of my process is making sure to do the user research and outreaching to like exactly who our users are, what their real pain points, what are their problems, what's their environment, what's their lifestyle. So I was able to apply a lot of that process into VR creation too. So one thing that I did was identify exactly who the subject matter expert I want is, what kind of knowledge do I need to know, and I just go on LinkedIn, identify the type of position who would have the expertise, and just cold outreach to them and tell them, you know, hey, I am working on this, and I notice in your profile that you have expertise in this. Do you have some time for a quick chat, or I have some questions to get an understanding on your topic. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is utilizing social media, where I would go to Facebook groups that have the type of subject matter experts that I'm looking for, and just start to go through all the different types of comments they have and the activity they have in those groups, and get that feel and understanding of what that culture is like, what's important to them before I even engage. So just to make sure that I come in a very empathetic position, and as soon as I'm ready and I identify who exactly is pretty knowledgeable in this group, who are the ones who, what kind of levels do they have, what kind of common questions they have, that's when I start engaging and asking questions and getting involved. And from them, you start becoming part of their community and start positioning yourself as someone who wants to help and wants to be a valuable asset to that industry. So that's a really great way to get these subject matter experts and really understand what's happening on their side of the topic.
Absolutely. So it sounds as if don't be afraid to cold call people. It's definitely a technique that one can use. I absolutely love that. You're right. You never know who's going to respond and who will be willing to talk to you. I also heard in that conversation, well, in that discussion points, concepts of active listening and empathy, which is fantastic. Everyone wants to be heard, and bringing in a subject matter expert and letting them know, hey, your voice is also valid and important in the creation of this product. It truly takes a village to create something meaningful, and that also includes creating a VR simulation or an XR simulation. Mm-hmm. So we had also discussed as that being one of the potential solutions, the idea of bringing in subject matter experts, right? Something else that we had also discussed was this concept of what we had called in our conversation ASH, or always speak human. This idea of how sometimes the technical jargon that is used when describing XR can be a little daunting for some folks who are new to this field. And so being able to speak human is essential, being able to speak in a vernacular of sorts that folks can understand and that people would easily want to tap into. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about the importance when we are discussing XR to the general public to use the sort of human vernacular that we should probably use when talking to the general folks. So Nilda, Chloe, if any of you have anything to say in terms of that, please go right ahead.
Yeah, I think when you're talking to someone who's not in the XR space, I think it's important to know to just ask questions first, really understand what they know and their knowledge. And that's where you could identify what their misconceptions are, how much they know, and how much in depth do they really want to hear with the topic. So for example, a question I would ask is, are you familiar with the term XR? And then if they say yes or no, that would determine like where I'm going to put the conversation through. So if they said, yes, I've heard of XR, awesome. Like what interests you? And then get a bigger, more understanding of like, what is it that's exciting to them about the technology and the industry? And then continue the conversation from there. But just having acronyms, it is talking within our bubble of XR professionals and people in the XR industry. If we're going to evangelize it, then we do need to just speak as normal as possible. So for example, if you even go to Google Trends and you type in XR and VR, we know like there is, VR is underneath the XR umbrella, but VR is what most people know. So that's just an example of how do you make language easier for people to understand.
There's also the issue of like a lot of people call the headset or HMD the goggles, like call them goggles, but like internal, like people in the VR industry will either call it HMDs. I like to use headset, but yeah, I definitely noticed that as well. Like when I think I was very lucky because I had already been a coder. I'd already knew how the language being used around VR was going to be applied, or I had some similar idea. I think it's a difficult subject for everybody, technical and non-technical. When you're onboarding and you're trying to get a sense of how this works, you're bringing on these spatial elements and it's like requires several different tools, and it's just its own universe. Like you're playing God, and so there's a lot of words that, like, yes, if you're you're technical, you may have already come across, and so you're like, even though that word might be used differently in VR. You at least have some sense of, or sometimes even a false sense of familiarity with it that doesn't become a barrier, that removes a barrier for you to approach it and kind of shortens the learning process. But yeah, I think the problem is because VR is so unique and so complex in its nature, and because we have so much ideas, we get so excited about it, especially when it's our first time using it, or if you're really passionate about it. And so you want to just get your ideas out without having to worry about what you're saying and how you're saying it, because that can slow you down. So it just becomes easier to only continue talking about to our community of other equal, passionate-minded technical VR, or it doesn't have to, you don't have to be technical, but people who are just excited about VR, they're more likely to understand. So we kind of just stay in this bubble. And the second we try to bring it out or to talk to people outside, we almost forget what it's like to come across the words object for the first time, and like how that's like, these people don't have a mental model of any of the terminology that we use for VR. even immersive reality, like that sounds like it explains it to us because we've been through it, we've been immersed in it. But to someone who's never been in VR, like that's not something that they're going to pick up or want to say. So I mean, I think I think the more we talk to people outside of VR, if we can balance our discussions, yes, we have our group to go to like talk about VR and ideas and whatever, but then also we talk to the real world about VR. And this is usually going to be best done through partnerships or by demoing VR to your friends and whatever, and then they're more likely to have a conversation about it. Like, I think the more we can kind of keep the empathy of what it's like being new to the industry and hearing all this terminology, because like I still have that. Most, like I would say 50% of my friends don't care about VR really, and then like the other 50%, like they're VR experts, period. And so it always keeps me like humble. I'll notice like on websites or on posts when people are explaining they're trying to sell their solution to the real world, but then they're using really technical jargon. And so I don't know, it's really hard at this point, it's going to require hand-holding. It's going to require people who are trying to get into VR and use it as a solution to like find an expert, and they kind of have to blindly follow this expert. Hopefully the expert knows what they're talking about to get to where they need to go. But it just creates an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, something I'm noticing too when I speak to non-VR folks is that conversation ends up being a lot more educational. This comes when I go on sales calls and pitching and demoing our product. The conversation ends up being like, oh, like, why are you choosing to use VR? How does it work? And how will my employees go through it? So there's a lot of educating when you're in the XR space in general to help them understand, like, okay, let's say you have this problem. Did you know that it will be better if you use VR? And this is why. So just being able to provide that link and that connection to something that they can relate to, and you can introduce something new to what they're used to already.
Yeah, that harkens back to that idea of active listening and empathy, understanding that that for a lot of folks this is brand new to them, right? So we have to be able to I guess always speak human with them, but I think we can also always be kind as well. I think that kind of harkens back to what you had said, Chloe, that we have to be mindful that for a lot of folks this is brand new, and we have to be okay if someone says HMD and if someone says goggles, and that's okay. I think that educational component is also very important as well. And I can't help but think of also, how are some other folks disseminating XR and VR and AR? I would love to hear your perspective on the very interesting headlines that I've been seeing that say that this is a death of VR and what have you. How is that influencing the dissemination of this sort of topic? What are your views and thoughts on that?
Yeah, I will add to your previous, like, yes, kindness and empathy, but also like value. Like if you can tell them how VR is going to solve their problem and the value that brings to them, then like you have them at least hooked, and then they're willing to learn. But without that piece of it, like they're not going to be really interested. It's going to sound like a gimmick, and that goes into what you're saying.
And how that value connects with their values. So you have to align with, you have to listen to what they say and hear, oh, I see, this is the value that's really important to you. Let's discuss how this modality of learning through XR can also assist with obtaining that value as well.
Yeah,
absolutely, right on.
So your question in terms of like dissemination, so I think the biggest problem right now is the cost to disseminate, and this is cost not in the sense of like just money, which is its own budget, but it's also the hardware, understanding what hardware is the best to use and what solution it can bring you, the cost of learning, the cost of figuring out what is the solution and how do you leverage spatial, the design solution in and of itself. Like that's its own thing. Like, are you using, teleporting? Are you navigating around or like floating? Like there's like all these a million design decisions in terms of the interaction design of the solution. on top of the content and what content you're creating, there's a cost to figuring that out and how that works best for, usually it's a custom solution, especially at this point.
Okay.
Cost of getting a partnership of a developer and getting a team to build this. It's the cost of what you're asking people who are going to be subject to this training to do and how to learn and how to onboard to this technology, because most people at enterprise, the workers, this is going to be their first time introducing it. It's the cost of selling to your decision makers about this project, especially when they've been hearing about VR as a gaming tool. So it's essentially you're equivalently trying to sell a PlayStation to a company that's going to fix their, like in my case, it's going to help them people be less biased, less sexist and less racist, whatever. And then so it's like that, like a PlayStation's going to do that. Like that's what it feels like when you're talking about VR, because it's been touted as that. So there's just a lot of hurdles similar to that I think is its own cost, and that's time as well. And so unless the value outweighs that, I think dissemination is going to just be hard until you're in a lucky, unique position when a company can get all those ducks lined up in a row because they internally are bought in and they internally understand the value and they have the budget to scale it out, especially right now when the market is very new. With the hardware is very unstable. There's new headsets coming out every 2 seconds. And so when you commit to one, you commit. So, because it might not be whatever you design solution you build, it's going to maybe hard to be cross-platform. You think about like a company buying like 500 headsets and they need to set them up like one by one or whatever. So like, it's just, there's a lot of cost that really presents the barrier to dissemination right now. And if you're a small indie solution, consultant solution, it's going to be, you're going to have a lot of funding for runway because it's
So I have
going to
time
be
for
tough.
like one question.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. So now we can go into the Q&A portion of the panel.
Hi, ladies. We've got a lot of great questions, and unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time. That has been the story of the morning this morning. Thank you so much for the great info. So let's get to the first question here. What is this? And this comes from Julie. What is the success rate for changing behavior and/or broadening perspectives with these VR apps that address problems like racism, sexism, in your experience?
I can definitely say, so there's a lot of case studies right now. Stanford, University of Barcelona, they show how VR simulations, something as simple as embodiment, you have to be careful though the way that people distribute it. Sometimes people put people through a trauma situation and think that's the solution. That's not necessarily it, but it has a different impact. But it's almost immediate. It's like literally if you're talking about testing, just the experiential aspect of being able to have people be introduced to a topic in a way that they can never be in because of the physical world limitations. It's literally, the impact is almost felt immediately and it's tenfold. Like a lot of people will go into an emotional, like they're going to take a time out, and that's something a training, an hour training or a 2-hour training, like this could be a 2-minute experience in VR, whereas usually an hour, 2-hour trainings can make people feel guilty or sad, but it doesn't really hit or stick the same way as having someone go through an experience does.
Oh, great answer. So one more, and this is one that I'm curious about too, is there a comprehensive list of these types of empathy building, tolerance focused environments that people can go and try to find an aggregated list of all of the options out there if we want to experience them or get involved?
I haven't heard of any, but I feel like it's a list we should start.
Yeah, we can put together a list.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if it was more than like 8 companies, but yeah, we could definitely do that.
Absolutely. I think if you give us a few weeks and we'll put something together.
Awesome. Great, you guys. And then let's just end with one final way that people can continue the conversation with you ladies and can ask more questions when there's more time and connect with you.
What was it?
Oh, so how to get in touch with us?
Yes, exactly. Sorry if that wasn't clear.
So for me, you could just connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email at neilda@mindglowinc.com.
Yeah, I'm at Twitter is a great way, at Creative Clo. But if you just Google my name, it's really unique. It'll come up everything, which way to reach me.
Wonderful. And you can also reach me at LinkedIn, Annie Escalante. And you can also reach me via email. My email is Annie, ANNIE, at behaviorme, BEHAVIORME.co.
Great. Well, thank you so much, ladies. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.